Great. So good evening. We'll call to order the Monday, October 25th, 2021 meeting of the Corte Madera Parks and Recreation Committee. Rebecca, will you please take roll call?
Commissioner Charlie? Commissioner Elson? Commissioner Koenig?
Here.
Commissioner Miles?
Here.
Commissioner Phipps?
Here.
Commissioner McPherson? Co-Chair Janowski?
Here.
And Co-Chair Brown.
Here. Thank you. Before we get into our agenda, item number 2 on our agenda tonight is an urgency action item. And Rebecca, I think you'll introduce this for commission review and vote.
Okay, thank you, Co-Chair Brown. This is being brought forward because the governor signed AB 361 on September 16th, 2021, which modified the Brown Act's requirements for holding teleconferenced meetings during states of emergency. The changes to the law are now in effect, and all Brown Act bodies holding remote meetings after September 30th, 2021 must comply with these new provisions. And due to inconsistencies and lack of clarity, some of provisions of AB 361, the town attorney's office may adjust their advice as needed in the coming weeks. But for now, the direction is that all of the town's boards and commissions adopt this these findings each time they meet to make sure that you are within the provisions of needing to adopt these findings once at least every 30 days. And since your commission only meets once a month, this will be on consent calendar item going forward until the town council directs our boards and commissions to resume meeting in person. And in this case, this was adopted by the town council as a resolution, but since your body does not adopt resolutions as a regular practice, our town attorney modified the findings so that it can be adopted as by motion rather than by resolution. So I will read the findings that your body is required to make, and then the chair will ask someone to make a motion adopting those findings. So there are 4 findings, and the first one is on March 4th, 2020, Governor Newsom proclaimed a state of emergency declared by Governor Newsom under the California Emergency Services Act due to COVID-19, which is still in existence. On August 2nd, 2021, the Marin County Public Health Officer issued a public health order requiring the wearing of face coverings in workplaces and public settings due to the rise of SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant, which is still in effect. State or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing, and the state of emergency declared by Governor Newsom on March 4th, 2020 continues to directly impact the ability of the Parks and Recreation Commission members, staff, and the public to meet safely indoors in person. And 4, the town council of the town of Corte Madera has directed all legislative bodies within the town to meet by teleconference until further notice. If someone is able to make the motion making those findings, we can take that now.
Motion to approve or accept. Motion to accept.
And I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Charlie? Commissioner Elson?
Yes.
Commissioner Koenig?
Yes.
Commissioner Miles?
Yes.
Commissioner Phipps? She was here. Commissioner McPherson? Co-Chair Janowski?
Yes.
And Co-Chair Brown.
Yes.
Thank you. And as I said, that will be on your consent calendar items going forward until the town council directs our boards and commissions to resume meeting in person. In this instance, though, since you have not met since the law went into effect, you are allowed to meet by video conference to determine whether to continue to meet by video conference, which is why this was an urgency item on the top of your agenda.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And before we start with those items on our agenda, we'll start with open time for public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Members of the public will be given 3 minutes apiece and can either raise a hand or email comments to publiccomments@tcmmail.org. And a reminder, this is for any topics not on tonight's agenda. Rebecca, do you see any raised hands or public comments?
I still need to check the email for emailed public comments, but there are 2 raised hands. The first one being Jill M, and I will unmute now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Jill Marte. I'm a resident of Larkspur, but my kids attended school in Corte Madera at Neil Cummins. They both participate in Corte Madera Parks and Rec programs, including Corte Madera FC. I'm asking tonight for urgent action for the board to provide actionable steps. Sorry? I'm asking tonight for urgent action for the board to provide actionable steps we need to take to help develop the field space in the East Field area. COVID has undoubtedly put a critical emphasis on outdoor activities as a safe means for exercise and also to receive the benefits of connection in a safe way and a means to maintain our children's mental health. Specifically for me, in this case, it's soccer. The current field state at Town Park limits our use and access in its current state. Natural grass fields are shut down for months out of the year to preserve them. They're also suffering from water restrictions because of the drought. Our soccer fields do not have lights, so we can't play after dark, October through April. A clear solution is offering our soccer leagues and clubs that are run through Parks and Rec a turfed out area of Field East, which is already zoned for turf. Our school board is behind us in this motion. By taking action to the turf field on the east area, our children can host more soccer games, practices during rainy season, fix the pothole issues we're constantly facing, especially during the drought season, and we can obtain hundreds of signatures in a petition if needed. My motion here is to ask what are the next best steps that we can take to address a consistent usable turf space in the East Field area at Corte Madera Town Park for soccer. Thank you.
Thanks very much for those comments, Jill. It's our policy not to comment or discuss on items brought forward by the community, but we will definitely take note of this and determine whether or not this should be brought forward as a business item in the future.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to also mention, I heard that there was a survey. I think because I'm a Larkspur resident, I did not have an opportunity to see the survey, but would be happy to fill that out if should one be provided, so we know that there's something out there. Thanks.
Great, and the survey results are on tonight's agenda, so you'll have a chance to hear the results of that survey, and we'll talk a little bit more about who that survey was sent out to. Rebecca, do we have another hand raised?
Yes, the next caller that I will unmute is Sarah Veal.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sarah Vigil, and I echo everything that Jill Marte just spoke about. I am part of the Corte Soccer FC, which is rec and competitive, and I coach out there. I help, organize, but I'm also a small business owner that rents fields in Corte Madera. I own Soccer Kiddos, and I am part of Soccer Kids. We've been on the field for, I feel like, 20 years. We bring in a lot of clientele to parks through all these different soccer programs. And I echo that, having a turf field will benefit this community. These kids are out there on the fields, and for months out of the year, they're shut down. And for the time that they are open, compounded by the drought and the use from many different sports, they're dangerous to a certain extent for the children. There's, potholes on them. There's, Public Works is doing what they can to preserve them. But, these are fields that, 1,000 soccer kids are on. And, we can bring revenue in with a turf field. We realize it's going to cost some money, but we can host tournaments. we can play all year round. Those fields can be rented all year round. And it's of concern to the community. I am a Corte Madera resident, and that survey was, difficult to find, very long in length. And we're happy to pull together, anything from the community, especially the Corte Madera FC talking about why a turf field would benefit these children. And I also have my 10-year-old son here who would like to speak as well.
Yeah, so it's really annoying to play because there's big potholes and stuff, and sometimes we trip in them, and it's really annoying. Also, when you kick a soccer ball, it's uneven, so they bounce in different ways, and it's kind of hard to trap the ball. I think it would be really nice if we have turf fields, because it would make them more flat, not more even, but it would help with like the ditches and stuff. Also, like sometimes we have to fill the ditches with sand. And when you fall, there's a lot of sand down, so you get some on your socks and everything, and it's just a mess.
All right. We just, echo the concerns, and there's a lot in the community that would very much love to see turf, and we know the school is on board with it. So, let us know what the next steps are that we can take to help push this along.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Sorry, I was muted. Sarah, thank you. And thank you to your son for being very articulate and passionate about this issue. Rebecca, do we have any other raised hands or public comment that's come in through TCM mail?
Yes, we have 2 more raised hands, one from Frank Bernardi and one from Pat Ravazio, and the next person I'll unmute would be Frank Bernardi. Hello, Frank.
Yeah, hi. It's kind of hard to follow that last comment. It was well done. I've run the Corte Madera soccer program with the park for the Park and Rec for probably 10 years now. And we have grown from under 300 kids when I started to over 1,000. And so essentially we deal with, if you look at 1,000 families, so a lot of people from Corte Madera, and it really would be nice to keep them in Corte Madera. Unfortunately, some of the other leagues around have better fields, have turf fields, and we lose kids every year because they want to play on better stuff. Look, I'll be the first to say that our fields over the years have really improved. They're, as far as grass fields, they're pretty nice, compared to what they used to be. But turf is a different animal. It gives us a lot of flexibility, and it's just another thing to help keep the kids here. So I just think it's something that not only soccer, but lacrosse, rugby, and the various sports could really benefit by playing year round and not having to worry if there's a little bit of rain. You can play on it. And it's also the initial cost is a bit high, but you do save a lot of money on maintenance because those fields technically don't really need much maintenance, if any at all. The one at Hall, which is really nice, actually, they just redid it every so often, and I'm not sure if it's every 6 months or every year. They just have to go over and put in some more of the ingredients, whatever they use, and that's about it. They brush it on, vacuum it off, and there's no watering, there's no worrying about fixing holes or anything like that. So I just think it helps the club, and just kind of move into the 21st century. There's a lot of clubs around that have the use of turf fields, and would just be a nice thing to do for the people of Corte Madera, I think. And again, it not only benefits soccer, but it would benefit the other sports that play in town, lacrosse, what have you. So that's pretty much just all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Frank. And I think this is even more top of mind after our record rainfall yesterday.
Thank you. And the last hand raised is from Pat Ravazio. And I will unmute now. Pat, are you there?
I am. Hi, everybody. I understand that it's been decided that the discussion on rental rates for the community center won't be happening until December, but since we are going to be doing some research on how other civic organizations are charged by their community center, I think there's some relevant information that I'd like to share now rather than wait. Most of you have already heard the true amazing story about the enthusiastic and talented people who started a Lions Club here back in the 1940s and dreamed of building a community center here in Corte Madera. They resourcefully harvested volunteer labor and discounted materials, including steel girders left over from construction of the Golden Gate Bridge. And the center was completed in 1951, 70 years ago. And ever since the Lions Club, with the support of the Women's Club, built the community center, they've also been building our community. Because they were owners, they had shares of ownership in the form of deeded weekly access to the community center. The Lions on Thursdays and the Women's Club on Tuesdays have been able to help create an active and lively civic life for our entire town. They didn't just build the community center, they actually built the community. All of our treasured annual traditions, from Oktoberfest, the crab feed, the 4th of July, beer garden, the indoor yard sale, and many more, are thanks to these organizations and the people who step up regularly to volunteer for them. And they are economical because of the policies that allow them this use of the recreation center. For example, it's only $20 a year to join the Women's Club. Both organizations have kept reinventing themselves, always coming up with fresh ideas, like this year's first annual Lions Club car show. And they've been inspiring and supporting volunteerism in our community for decades. And I believe that's a big reason why Corte Madera is known for how active and engaged our citizenry is. So the rest of us, whether we're on staff or on the commission or residents in town, it's our job to be stewards and protectors of these treasured longtime community organizations. So as you move forward to do your research, I hope you'll really recognize that these two organizations aren't just civic orgs that support the recreation center, but they actually are essential to keeping good things happening in our community. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate that input. And we will be addressing the fees in an upcoming commission meeting.
Thank you.
Rebecca, do we have any more raised hands or any public comment through the email?
Thank you. No, we do not have any more raised hands, and we did not receive any emailed public comment.
Okay, so if there are no more public comments, we will close this section and move into presentations. The first presentation tonight is an update on code enforcement activity in Town Park from Mike Moriarty, our communications and code enforcement manager. So Mike, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you very much, members of the commission and members of the public, for inviting me here today to provide you a brief update as to what's been transpiring in Town Park and in the parks in general. It's been several months since I've reported back to you regarding some issues in the park. And one of the primary areas of concern were dogs off the leash, if you remember. And since then, we have hired an additional code enforcement officer and a part-time code enforcement officer. And we've allocated significant resources to the park, both in the afternoon, well, throughout the day during the work week, as well as in the evening hours, a few days a week, as well as having weekend coverage. The only days we do not have coverage at this point is every other Sunday. And so I believe we've made a significant impact on the amount of dogs off the leash. But let me take a little bit step backwards here and just tell you what's transpired since over the last year. We saw the need to do our own enforcement through the town, as opposed to relying on Central Marin Police Authority to do enforcement action. We saw that the repeated neighbor complaints about dogs off the leash were not swiftly handled by CMPA due to them resolving police activities in town. So we had to create an administrative citation ordinance to allow us to enforce these provisions in the municipal code. And then once that was established, we needed to actually create an administrative citation, and on that document we created for both application of the municipal code, but also for the building department for building related incidents, we created an official warning document that we'll have on file. So, and then once we obtain the citations, we develop policies and procedures on how to enforce and issue those citations. So most recently, within the last month or so, we just received those administrative citations and those official warning documents. And I will tell you, over the last 6 months, we've issued more than 100 verbal warnings. And just recently, we were able to approach one of our prolific dog off the leash individuals and issued him a formal warning. This afternoon, I was at the park where we got a call from an individual who was reporting the same individual with the dog off the leash. And by the time we got there, the individual had left. But we have intent to issue these administrative citations to correct the behavior. I will tell you that in general, with the amount of warnings we've issued, we've definitely curbed the issue. I was happy to see this afternoon about 5 o'clock. I was at the park and I saw, the dog park was actually being used by 6 or 7 residents with their dogs, and I didn't see any additional dogs off the leash. So it's nice to see that the repeated warnings and the discussion about dogs off the leash and the education is being received by the community. And for the most part, we're having some some compliance. I will tell you that we've had some resistance. Some of the individuals we've contacted, we've experienced somewhat of an entitled approach where the individual will say, "Hey, well, we have a leash, and it was just a minute," and we're dealing with these on a case-by-case basis, but we're educating, we're documenting, and ultimately the end result will unfortunately be an administrative citation if we see multiple subsequent violations. So I wanted to report that because we are seeing a difference. I think also with the amount of soccer players and families on the fields that has somewhat corrected itself as well. Nobody wants dogs running off, wild in the park with numerous children around. So I wanted to, provide you the update on that and let you know that we were listening and we've developed policy. We're all set up now to actually take care of this issue once and for all. A couple other things that are occurring at the park, and I hope that you can share this with some of the members of the community, is we're seeing parking issues, red zone violations, fire lane violations, ADA access violations, handicap violations at Town Park, both in Pixley side and also in the Eastman Extension side. Part of what we've done in the last few months of vamping up our code enforcement efforts is we've taken on some of their parking enforcement responsibilities from Central Marin Police Authority, and we've issued citations for those violations. So we need to curb this issue. It's handicap violations and the ADA access to the park. The other day we saw cars blocking the sidewalk for the handicap access. So we are issuing tickets, and so we've issued not warnings but citations for these offenses. That's a relatively new job function that we're doing here at Town of Corte Madera. We have seen over the summer a significant amount of graffiti in the bathrooms at Town Park. The Assistant Superintendent Jamie King and myself have been documenting these with Central Marin Police Authority through online police reportings. We've contacted the school resource officer. We're trying to identify the graffiti suspects, so to speak. There's multiple, but they're causing thousands of dollars worth of damage in the inside of these bathrooms. So if we can get the word out for parents to, if they're seeing tags and graffiti, coming home with, on binders and stuff, to hopefully take some parental direction and curb this situation, because ultimately Central Marin, or we're compiling basically the data. And if an individual is caught and we are able to identify the tagger, so to speak, those parents are liable for all the thousands of dollars worth of repair damage that we've had to apply towards correcting the conditions. So with the addition of the code enforcement officer on the weekends, we certainly curb that. We were having issues nearly every weekend. And once we started having the code enforcement officer on the weekends patrolling Town Park for 5 hours at a time, that went from weekly to monthly and every 6 weeks. So it's not something we want to do, but we definitely want to prevent this from happening. And so one of the discussion points is to install CCTV cameras in the vicinity of the skate park and in the area of the tennis courts, the access points, which would just record the interactions and potentially be a deterrent for any additional graffiti. And that is essentially all that I have to report. And I'm happy to field any questions, and both online or offline. And if you have any suggestions, advice, guidance, we're happy to listen. And we recognize that we work for the community, and we're trying to just provide a better community for our residents. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that update. Are there any questions from the commissioners before we open this up for public comment? I had a couple questions. Maybe I'll just get us started. On the parking issues that you're seeing, are those primarily during the weekends when we have had such a crush of visitors to Town Park with soccer, et cetera? Or are you seeing this?
Yeah, so no, it hasn't been on the weekends. It's been mostly in the afternoons between 3 and 5:30 or 6. And that's when I think when we're seeing a lot of drop-offs and pickups for soccer. We have had some on the weekends, but I've had my officers print duplicate copies of these citations, and they're occurring in the afternoons. And it was obviously prior to the rains, but we have a large volume of people accessing the park, and unfortunately there's just so many parking spaces, right? But people are going to have to walk a little further, and just an example is there's certain areas in the park where the access points that have the handicap parking spaces, and then there's the checkered spot next to it, and they're being accessed and being occupied as well. And so I think that this will correct itself with the word getting out that there's actually citations being issued, because handicap violation citations over $300. Our fire zone tickets they're 40 or 50, but nobody wants to have to go through that, and that's the last thing we want to do. But we know that issuing a few citations will correct the conditions as soon as the word gets out, and it's the unfortunate part of our job, obviously.
Great, thank you. And then I just had a question about the graffiti, which is so distressing, especially after we've just invested to upgrade or put some new shine on the bathrooms there at Town Park. Is this an isolated to Corte Madera Town Park issue, or is CMPA seeing sort of patterns of graffiti and tagging that are hitting other parks and other areas locally?
Yeah, this is not a town only issue. I mean, I was in law enforcement for 20 years, and it's consistent with parks in general. Anytime you have juveniles congregating in certain areas, and some of those same tags, they're present in the skate park.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some leads with some skateboard individuals having the same tags on the skateboards, which indicates they clearly know who the suspect individual is. But we've turned that over to Central Marin Police Authority, and we don't want to overstep our boundaries, but it's problematic, and there's just it's a delicate situation. We want to provide the skate park for the kids to enjoy the place, but there's not a lot of ownership and pride in the park, and that's what we need. We need them to And you know, the actions of one individual can ruin it for everyone. And I've been over there, and I've been very clear with, you know, you guys could potentially lose your skate park because of the amount of damage. And we're talking about thousands of dollars worth of damages and multiple, you know, multiple days in a row of, you know, the staff coming in and they're like, oh, they got us again. And they spend hours cleaning up. And sometimes they leave it for a couple of days because they have other work to do, but you know, we want to keep that clean. And I think it's really has to do with the proximity of the skate park to the bathrooms. But some of these tags I'm seeing all over town. You know, I see them on dumpsters. I've seen them at Town Hall on our dumpsters. I've seen them at our new location at 240 Tamil Vista when we moved there. I've seen them on the dumpsters there. So, you know, this all catches up to people in the end, and that's why, like I mentioned, that you know, when an individual is caught, you know, the parents are ultimately have to pay the sacrifice of, you know, paying these fines, and so you know, we're putting the word out. I know Erin has talked with the kids at the skate park, and she's establishing a rapport and trying to, you know, establish this pride in the community, and that's really what it takes. And I don't know necessarily that you know, that if they're Corte Madera kids that are doing this, and you know, the skate park, you know, attracts kids from all over the area. And so over the weekend typically is when we were experiencing it. So, but you know, the kids do know who are responsible for these tags, and it really just takes the village, the community, to find out, and the parents to get involved and be observant and notice. And you know, I mean, I talked to the town manager about offering a reward and incentivizing this, and that's certainly on the table. But we're hoping that the school resource officer could potentially elicit information that could lead to the identification, potentially an arrest or what. But it needs to stop, and we're doing everything we can to prevent that.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the commissioners?
I was just curious in regards to the citation for the off-leash dogs. What is the cost? What's the citation value?
Yeah, the current bail schedule is $76. Yeah, and so we're Rebecca and I today were talking about the town's bail schedule, and it hasn't been amended in a very long time. And so at some point, it's going to go to council to discuss this bail schedule and elevate it, because our fines are significantly low. But a $76 ticket, I certainly wouldn't want to have one. And for the most part, individuals will give them a warning. They understand, and they see. His name is Adam, our code enforcement officer. He's at the park every day, and he's talking to people. And you know, the other thing we're doing in code enforcement, we recently have body worn cameras, so we're recording the interactions with individuals. So once we do end up issuing a citation, there's documented history of multiple warnings, and if it went to an appeal, we would certainly show these recordings of these interactions and the blatant disregard. But you know, I mean, I'm a dog owner. I mean, dogs are like part of your family, and I get it. But you know, it's like speeding, or you know, jaywalking. It's, you know, it's the law is the law. We're just tasked with enforcing it. So we're asking for compliance. You know, we developed a dog park. We have it. We're just encouraging it to be used.
Okay, if there are no other questions from commissioners, we can open this up to any public comment on this issue, either through raised hands or email to publiccomments@tcmmail.org.
I am not seeing any raised hands, and we did not receive any emailed public comments on this item.
Okay, if there are no public comments, then we'll bring it back to the commission for any discussion and ideas, input, or direction to communications and code enforcement on these issues.
I have a comment that I'm glad that we really are now able to give the fines, because I think all the warnings just they don't work, unfortunately. So I commend that effort, and hopefully that's how you're going to see a behavior change. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Yeah, I echo that. I think there's nothing that's going to change the behavior like a couple of stiff fines, and the word will get out about that. And I also think that we should continue to explore opportunities to really try to deal with the graffiti issue before it gets any worse. It's costing the town a lot of money, and I would advocate that we look into a plan for CCTV just to see if we can try to curtail that. I think even the possibility of having cameras recording people's actions is a deterrent.
Yeah, and so the park, excuse me, and the Public Works Director and I met with a contractor to discuss some preliminary options. They haven't been completely vetted yet. We've talked with the town attorney about the recordings and how long they need to be on file and held for. So we're just kind of working on the logistics behind that, but I see it definitely coming to light in the near future. And the ones that we're looking at are they're cloud-based. They can be relocated, repurposed in another area of town for illegal dumping or whatever. So it could be a capital asset for the town, and hopefully would certainly curb the behavior and protect the town and for liability purposes on other issues as well. So more to report in the future on that.
And so, Mike, just to clarify, it sounds like you believe that most of the graffiti is being done by a small number of people. Is that correct?
I do think that a handful of individuals are responsible for the majority of the graffiti, and I base that on the amount of the consistent tags that are unique to an individual, and the amount of different locations they're being located, they're surfacing in town. Of course, you know, there was a weekend that there was a bunch of art and profanities and things like that, and they were totally different than the tags and these tags we're actually seeing on the ramps, on the rail slides in town park. Excuse me, the skate park. We're also having an issue with the kids on the roof of the restroom. And so they're climbing up there, and we've seen this on YouTube. They're climbing up on there and they're jumping in with their skateboards. It's totally dangerous. I've talked to Assistant Superintendent King about installing some kind of a device or something to prevent them from accessing that point. So the skate park is accumulating some problems for us, but it just requires some more attention and some resources. Hopefully with the winter coming, some of these issues will subside as well.
Emily, I don't know how many of the Friends of the Skate Park group are still in Corte Madera, or have they all like
I mean, that was 5 years ago. That was my comment too, Sarah. I mean, it is kind of sad because there was so much energy and pride around the skate park when that group of boys who are now in their second year of college, many of them, some might be around, but the majority have, you know, dispersed across the country. And so that's what it feels like. If there was a way we could get some current leadership among park users, skate park users, to give that sense of pride again, because we really had it for a while.
Yeah.
And the biggest issues we had were with like the toddlers, you know, trying to come on and slide down the ramp with their entitled parents defending their use. But when we got the signage going, that helped. And I don't know, I hope that, I don't know, my kids are not skate park users, and they're old now. So maybe one of the younger commissioners could do a little research on who are active users and try to enlist them to kind of, if it comes from within, that's going to resonate a lot more with the teenagers than the authorities.
I think especially too, if it's people out of town on the weekends, you know, coming from out of town and doing this in their community, in their park. I understand it sounds like there's two different things going on, but it would be great if we could somehow find that local core group of kids that use it and, you know, just talk to them about having pride in their park.
Yeah, I agree completely. just to capitalize on what you had said too, is, I live in Petaluma and we have a skate park over near the swim center, and there's graffiti throughout. And so it's not a Corte Madera issue alone, and it typically just follows the culture of some users. But there is a following of about 8 individuals that go to the park every day, and they use the skate park. And if we can get some buy-in with them, we may be able to turn the corner and create some change. I was out there yesterday, late last week, and I was going to go talk with them, and I saw this group. They steered away from the actual skate park, and they were playing in the leaves, being kids, and it brought a smile to my face that they're enjoying the park the way it should be. And so anyway, I don't want to lose focus here, but
okay, any other discussion on this topic? Thank you so much for the update and for the discussion. We'll look forward to future updates and hopefully a continued decline in infractions. It's not the way we want to make our money in the town, is by having to cite individuals for all of these different issues.
sure. Well, thank you for your time.
Okay, so we're moving on to the consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been previously discussed and do not require any further discussion. Any member of the public is welcome to make a comment or pull an item from the consent calendar for further discussion. And we'll start by asking if anyone from the commission would like to pull anything from the consent calendar tonight, which just consists of the approval of minutes from September 27th meeting. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on the minutes from the meeting, either through a raised hand or a comment through TCM mail? I don't see any raised hands. Is there anything in the public comment mail, Rebecca?
We did not receive any emailed public comments on this item.
Okay, great. With that, we'll bring it back to the commission for a possible motion. Would anybody like to move to approve the minutes from the September 27th, 2021 regular commission meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting last month, September 27th.
Great, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second it.
We could do a vote.
Thank you. Also, I'm not sure how this will work, but I noticed that I was noted that Emily Charlie, one of our commissioners, was unable to join the meeting as a panelist because of Wi-Fi issues she's experiencing, and she's on the meeting as an attendee, and she's been on the meeting as an attendee since the beginning, and I can't move her over to the panelist side, but she said she's been trying to vote, but I haven't unmuted her. So I will attempt to unmute her this time to make sure that that works. And Commissioner Charlie.
Guess it's still not working.
Okay, I tried. Commissioner Elson,
Yes.
Commissioner Koenig,
Shannon, you're muted.
I'm sorry, yes.
Commissioner Phipps,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson, Co-Chair Janowski,
Yes.
and Chair Brown.
Yes. Great, thank you. So that brings us to tonight's business items. The first item is the Town of Corte Madera Parks and Recreation Needs Assessment Survey Results Readout, and I'll turn this over to Ashley to introduce our guest.
Yes, in February of 2021, the Parks and Recreation Department sought out companies to administer a community needs assessment survey and analyze the data to support the Parks and Recreation Master Plan development process. And the analysis that you will hear tonight, you'll be used to guide community engagement discussions related to enhancing infrastructure, facilities, and programs for the next 3 to 10 years. In March, ETC Institute was awarded the contract based on their extensive experience and expertise, along with their proprietary methodology for helping communities prioritize investment opportunities. And I'm happy now to introduce Ryan Murray, Assistant Director of Community Research, who has been the lead on this project to present the results of the Community Needs Assessment Survey. Thank you for joining us, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. Thank you to the commission for allowing me to be here this evening. And thanks to all the participants we have from the community. Hopefully we learn a lot this evening. Just to kind of preface tonight, there's a lot to get to. As somebody alluded to during the public comment section, it was a very long survey. We thought it was well within the range of acceptability, but there's just a lot of results that come with that length of the survey. So we're going to touch on most of the major highlights. Most of these major highlights will focus on improvements where they could be made or future improvements to further promote and use services in the community. But all slides will be made available to the public, and also I believe the full report will be made available as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here and try to get this thing to full screen. There we go. And I'm going to wait for nod of heads to understand that I'm good. Okay, great. I'm working with one monitor this evening, so please excuse me. So again, thanks for the introduction, Ashley. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Research with ETC Institute. We're really a national leader in market research for governmental organizations. So we're really kind of in the wheelhouse of doing this type of business. As you can see from all those blue dots, some of those are larger and smaller based on how many clients we have in those particular areas, but we work all across the country with parks and recreation organizations and city governments, really to help those organizations make better decisions through survey research. And so that's what we did here today. Tonight, we'll talk about the purpose of the survey as well as the methodology. We'll briefly touch on that, major findings, and then I'll take any questions at the end of the presentation. The purpose of the survey was really to administer this as part of the town's master plan development process. And this is just kind of a small piece in that larger master planning development. The survey purpose is really to objectively assess a number of items, including satisfaction, usage, needs, for really a wide range of recreation, parks, amenities, facilities, programs, and events. Some of those are currently provided by the town. Some of those are currently not provided by the town, but offered at town facilities or within the town. And we'll get to that in just a few slides. But the main point of the survey was really to help identify opportunities for the town to serve better the leisure needs and recreation needs of residents. And that's what we were able to do. So the crux of the survey is that the results were really good and positive when we talk about satisfaction and objectively assessing that from residents. But really the purpose of the survey was to help identify items, either priority investment items or opportunities for improvement. And that's what we set out to do. It was a 6-page survey. Most of these surveys, I would say 99% of these surveys that go out to parks and recreation organizations are really 7-page surveys. And we did a lot of work to make sure we parsed that down and sent out a 6-page survey, something easier to digest by residents. And the way that we did that was offered it to all Corte Madera residents by mailing that survey first. And some folks might have thrown that in the trash. But what we do is we begin email follow-up shortly after those surveys arrive in town. And I know that town also spent a lot of work making sure they were publicizing that link. We also administered the survey to non-town residents who participated in town recreation programs. We didn't really have a great robust response to that particular survey, so we won't be presenting or talking about those results this evening, but those results are available to the town, and they really serve as an anecdotal reminder to how needs and perceptions change outside of town, or how maybe they don't. The sample size for the community, the goal was to collect 400 completed surveys, which gives us a margin of error much higher than the one we obtained because we had such a great showing by mailing the survey to all town residents that we had almost 700 completed surveys, or 685 completes. That gives us a margin of error of about 3.5%, technically 3.6%. But if I refer back to that margin of error, I might slip and round that down to that 3.5% at the 95% level of confidence, which means that if the survey were administered 100 times to all town residents, 95 out of 100 times, we're going to get these same results, plus or minus our margin of error for all of those questions that were answered by all 685 respondents. When we talk about what we learned, these are really high-level findings, not really, almost scratching the surface here, I would say. Some of the major findings here is that nearly 3 out of 4 respondents indicated they're satisfied with the value their household receives from the town's Parks and Recreation Department, and only 6.1% of respondents gave dissatisfied responses. The rest of those folks fell into that neutral category, which is really you're a passing grade. So you didn't influence me in a negative way to give me a dissatisfied response, but I didn't have that positive perception either. A lot of probably non-users or folks that just aren't really sure how much maybe they are paying in taxes to the town Parks and Recreation Department. Above and beyond that, almost 90% of residents indicated they'd use the town park. Almost 70% of residents indicated they'd use Town Park Plaza over the past 2 years out of town-owned parks only. When we asked residents who'd visited those particular parks, almost all residents indicated they gave excellent or good ratings when asked to rate Town Park, and 85% of residents gave excellent or good ratings when asked to rate the plaza. Barriers for those not using the town's community or recreation center and park. So we asked residents, what are some of those reasons why you're not using these items if you indicated you'd never used any of them? Really, it's a lack of programs or lack of interest in programs that are offered at the Community Recreation Center. About half of respondents told us that, and that's really what the survey set out to do, was to help identify priorities as it relates to both facilities, amenities, and also programming. Some folks indicated about 40% or 36% indicated they're unfamiliar with programs offered at the Community Recreation Center. And only about 1 out of 4 respondents who indicated they'd not used the town's facilities, that they really just lacked features they want to use. And again, the survey really set out to help tackle a lot of these particular barriers that were determined from the survey. Beyond kind of just the high level, what did we learn? We also developed a priorities for improvement. This is really based on a specific design structure of the survey instrument, asking first satisfaction, and then asking residents to prioritize those particular items that they were asked to rate. The important satisfaction analysis is used in hundreds of communities nationwide, particularly when it comes to the core city services of a community. We have everybody from San Diego, California, to Austin, Texas, to Miami, Florida, using our important satisfaction analysis. And based on our analysis, the following were determined really to be the top priority improvements in order to improve that value of satisfaction that we talked about in a previous slide. And that's really improving town park bathrooms, improving the community center, and town park athletic fields. And we've heard a little bit about a couple of those items this evening, maybe all 3 even. But really what I see from this analysis, when we see this analysis and we see something like town park bathrooms at the top of the list, it's really just more signs that residents are generally satisfied with the Parks and Recreation offerings. And we're really just kind of nitpicking some of those additional amenities that maybe most communities don't even experience in a majority of their parks, where most communities aren't offering robust town bathrooms in their communities as well. When it comes to top investment priorities, we'll go through the methodology just a little bit and how we determined these priorities, again, based on very specific design features, asking respondents to indicate their level of need and the importance of each one of these facilities or amenities, programs, events and programming items, which some of these items in the event programming column are not necessarily offered by the town, but are offered in the town. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. And we'll go through this. And again, these slides will be made available to you. So if you're looking for something that's near and dear to your heart, we will have these slides offered, as well as the full report to residents. First, I want to talk about some of the perceptions of the town's Parks and Recreation Department. We already kind of went through this particular side, but most households are satisfied with the value they receive from the town Parks and Recreation Department. 1 in 5 residents really gave that neutral response, but a vast majority, over 72% of residents, indicated they're very satisfied or satisfied, with just very few, about 6% or so, indicating any kind of dissatisfaction when, again, talking about the overall value received from the department. When we asked respondents to rate their level of agreement with various statements regarding Parks and Recreation, really we're trying to get some messaging items and some items that we want to take to heart here. We understand that most residents, as you can see from the large strongly agree and agree ratings towards the top of this list, indicated that the Parks and Recreation improves property values, is accessible to residents, strengthens communities. But the couple that really received the highest level of agreement ratings was that Parks and Recreation is a valuable resource for Corte Madera residents, as we could tell from that 76% or so indicating their satisfaction with the value received. They also believe it enhances the quality of life and preserves green space and provides opportunities or areas of natural beauty in the community. So a lot of agreement to a majority of these statements here, with very little disagree or strongly disagreement from any particular residents for any of the statements on this particular list. Next, we'll talk about general usage of the town's facilities and amenities. We asked in a typical year, kind of making sure that we were aware of the times that we're in and not kind of just being deaf to that particular COVID-19 issue. But in a typical year, we asked approximately how often households use or visit the town's community or recreation center. And what we see is that 61 or almost 62% of residents indicated they visit the community or recreation center at least once in a typical year. So nearly 40% or 4 out of 10 respondents indicated they've never visited that facility. And that's where we got those barriers to participation ratings from. We asked residents who had visited the town's community or recreation center how they'd rate the condition of that particular item. Excuse me, as we can see here, almost 70% or 7 out of 10 respondents who visited the facility indicated the condition of the facility was either excellent or good. And again, those barriers are specifically from those 40% or that 38.3% of residents that indicated they had never visited the recreation or community center. And really, it's majority a lack of programs they're interested in, or they're unfamiliar with the programs offered. Those are really the two biggest barriers. And we asked a few communication questions on the survey because we knew that we were going to be asking barriers questions, and we want to make sure that we can reach those folks in the most proper ways. We also asked about how, or approximately again in a typical year, how often households use or visit town parks. So again, more facilities questions. Here we only had about 7% of respondents say never, with the majority, 92.1% of residents indicating they'd visited at least one facility during a typical year. We asked residents to rate each of the parks offered by the town of Corte Madera. As we can see here, most of the parks and facilities in the system really received high levels of excellent and good ratings, with the exception maybe of the Granada Park tennis court, with about 1 out of 10 respondents indicating from those who had used it that they weren't necessarily satisfied with the condition. But as we can see there, only about 1 in 5 residents, if you look at that 21.5% over there to the right, that bottom line item, we'll see only about 1 in 5 residents rated that particular item. So that's why we have such a large percentage of poor responses, just teasing that out from the percentage of respondents who'd actually visited one of these particular facilities over the last year. So again, just keeping in mind all of these ratings here, excellent, good, fair, poor ratings, are specifically from the 86.7% of respondents for Town Park that indicated they'd visited that particular facility. And all of that is kind of spelled out a little bit more in detail in the report. And you can take a look at those results also in the tabular data of that report. We also asked residents why they'd not visited one of these town parks. Again, it was that lack of features they want to use. And that was really just 1 out of 4 respondents. But again, just keeping in mind, it was only 6.9% of residents who indicated they'd never or don't ever on a typical year visit a town park. So again, very few respondents in that category, mainly focused on that community recreation center for lack of usage. When we go through our next slides here, these are our Parks and Recreation Facility Program and Activity ratings. We asked residents, again, kind of alluding back to that important satisfaction analysis, your satisfaction with a variety of facilities, programs, and activities. I've highlighted these 3 items at the top because they are also the 3 most important items to the majority of households who took the survey. That's Town Park Playground, Bayside Trail, and Town Park Athletic Fields. As we go over to our importance ratings, we notice that those 3 items are still at the top of that list. And what we're looking for on our final slide here is that items that have above average importance and below average satisfaction are going to make their way towards the top of this list. And the idea is if we improve satisfaction at the lists, at the items at the top of this list, we're going to improve overall satisfaction with the delivery of services from the Parks and Recreation Department. So again, I've alluded to this previously, in communities where I find bathrooms at the top of a priorities list, I know that things are going pretty well, and that was all set up by those other general satisfaction or facility rating questions that we asked before. So I wouldn't have made that statement had I not seen other results within the survey that suggested folks are generally satisfied with the offerings provided by town. But the crux of the survey, or the idea of the survey, was to help develop priorities for improvement. And this is really for future and priorities moving forward into the future as the town develops their master plan and begins to really do a deep dive into these facility and amenity priorities. And what we did through the survey was we developed priority investment ratings. And this is really the first data point of that, where we asked respondents to indicate yes or no. Does your household have a need for these various parks and recreation facilities and amenities? Seeing trails, steps, and pathways, about 71.5% of households indicated someone in their household has a need. Of those households that indicated they'd had a need for one of those particular facilities or amenities, we asked the respondents to indicate how well their needs are currently being met in their household. And again, we see a lot of 0% met for some of those items that maybe we're not offering. Like if you look at the bottom, public swimming pool, about 93% of respondents indicated 0% needs met for that particular item. We then asked residents to indicate from the list of all of the amenities, which amenities are most important to their households. So we not only want to know, do you have a need, but we want to know how important that area is to you. So we really want to know. Again, 38% of households selected trails, steps, and pathways as one of their top 4 choices of importance. And after we've boiled this down, and again, the full methodology for this analysis is delivered in the full report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about this analysis after the presentation. But what we do is we divide these into 3 tiers of priorities. Really, the items in that pink or red category at the top are our top priorities for improvement. And what that means is that those priorities are going to have the greatest bang for the buck, meaning that the most number of households or the largest number of households in the community are going to be impacted by the development or improvement of those facilities at the top of the list. The area in yellow means fewer households will be impacted by improvements or developments of these types. And the areas at the green do not mean we should be taking away resources from those particular items, but those items have a lesser impact on a lesser number of homes in the community. Most oftentimes we'll find items in the green category that are really being served well in the community by a large number of households or a good number of households, but because there's not a large unmet need in the community for those particular items, we'll see those items go to the bottom of this list or towards the bottom of this list. And I know skate park has been a giant topic tonight. I'd just like to quickly touch on that. Skate parks at the bottom of this list, primarily because of the low numbers of households who indicated someone in their household has a need. Not because it's not an important amenity to those community members who are regularly using it, but just because there are fewer households in the community that will be impacted by another skate park or massive improvements to the current skate park. And that's how you should really review these tables. We did this exercise for 3 other sets of items. The second one is program and event priorities. We asked again the percentage of households that have a need for these particular programs and events. We asked those households who had a need, how well their needs are currently being met. And we asked those respondents to prioritize those particular programs and events. Based on that analysis, we found that weekly food truck event, outdoor concerts and performing arts, cultural events, and local history walks and talks are really at the top of the list. Again, keeping in mind impacting the largest number of households in the community. And a lot of those items are kind of regardless of age or ability, most residents can participate. So again, kind of helping to formulate the idea as to why some of these items are at the top, whereas some of the items are at the bottom of this list. We also did this for event programming priorities, and not all of these events are offered through the town, but are offered in the town. And so I think that needs to be made very clear here. We asked respondents if they had a need for these particular events and programs. We asked how well their needs are met. We asked them to prioritize those particular events and programs and determine the top priorities for those same programs. And again, all of that methodology can be found in the full report, along with all of the breakdown of all responses to the survey. One of the major items here was to help determine barriers to participation and usage. As we saw for your town parks, only about 7% of respondents, even with our margin of error, maybe 1 out of 10 households in the community on a typical year never visit one of your facilities. On the other hand, about 40% of respondents, or 4 out of 10 households, indicated that they've never visited the community or recreation center. And we saw clear barriers to participation and usage in each one of those particular items. And so what I always like to do is inform my clients that we really need a communications question. We really need to understand what's the best way to reach out to households. And so we asked respondents the current ways that they learn about Corte Madera Parks and Recreation programs, activities, and events, finding that the mailed Parks and Recreation activity guide is really the most used resource, followed by marquee boards at community centers and next door. And I'm seeing a major trend nationally over the last 3 or 4 years of these 3 items really being among the most used in most communities. But it's not enough to know which ones are being most used if you're relegated to using the mailed Parks and Recreation activity guide because it's not made available digitally, which is not the case here, but just for circumstance, then it's it's going to be your most used source. So we want to understand what are the most preferred sources, and we want to try to align those best we can with our communication and outreach efforts. And what we found is that not only is the mailed Parks and Recreation Activity Guide the most used, but it is the most preferred. And so we should continue to emphasize that particular communication method, as well as the marquee boards next door, making sure that there's some kind of public or Parks and Recreation official who can kind of get into next door and act as that community liaison, and as well as mailing out or emailing out those weekly town newsletters just to make sure folks are informed. When it comes to some of those other barriers about the programming and things like that, the priority investment ratings will help inform folks as to what programs we could be offering or what facility improvements we could be making to help break down some of those other barriers. But communication is a huge piece to that when it comes to awareness or lack of awareness. We also asked a couple specific questions about Park Madera Center. This is really ratings and importance of potential actions. This is a town-owned property. It's really adjacent to Town Park in the community center there. And as you can see on the map, it's that red Google Map pin right there in the kind of the right-hand side. Some Parks and Recreation programs already happening within the Park Madera Center, but the survey asked respondents to weigh in on how Park Madera could potentially be used in the future with relation to Parks and Recreation. And so we asked respondents to rate how important it was for potential actions to be made at Park Madera Center. Again, these were just potential actions put out to the community for some feedback. And what we found is that repurposing that space for Parks and Recreation facilities and programs garnered the most support. And that's really just summing up the very important responses, kind of excluding everything else. And as we see, we've ordered the chart that way as well. If you look down there, new mixed use development, including affordable housing, is really one of those items respondents were kind of most adamant about not supporting, but really we're going to focus on that repurposed space for Parks and Recreation facilities and programs, because again, we asked respondents to prioritize those items or which actions they think they would most support the town taking. And again, that was repurposing space. About 40% of respondents indicated they would be willing to support that particular item when asked to select 2 out of the entire list. And again, we had about 70% of respondents indicate they support it or they believe that's an important action, with about 40% of those same respondents indicating they'd support that choice. We also asked a singular question and then a follow-up question about funding opportunities. We asked, and again, this is a multiple response question, so just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking through the results here. We asked respondents if they'd be willing to make any kind of financially support to future investments or improvements to the town of Corte Madera Parks and Recreation programs, and if so, what ways? We had about 1/3 of respondents indicate those 3 yes responses, either through a tax deductible donation, through a special tax assessment, or through increased fees for facilities and programs. Only about 1/4 of respondents, even adding in our margin of error, still around 1/4, just are not willing to make that financial support. About 4.2% of respondents said some other type, and about 1 out of 10 respondents just said they're not sure. For those respondents that gave one of those 3 yes response options, we asked how much they'd be willing to contribute to support new facilities and programs. A vast majority of respondents said they'd be willing to support with at least $100. And if you see that dark green cut of the circle there, about 46.5% of respondents said they'd be willing to support with $100 to $499, with another 17.3% indicating $500 to $1,000, and another 10% indicating $1,000 to $5,000. A much smaller percentage indicating more than $5,000. But a vast majority of respondents to the survey indicated at least $100 would really be that investment that they'd be willing to make, with fewer respondents, about 13% saying less than 100. In summary, really the major takeaway of the survey results is that folks are very satisfied with what's currently being offered to the town. Folks are feel like the community is in generally good health. I would support that assumption based on the fact that the important satisfaction analysis really pinpointed town park bathrooms as the major improvement that they'd like to see be made to really current offerings or current facility improvements. So folks in the town are very satisfied with what's currently being offered, especially when you kind of phrase that in terms of value for what's being offered. A couple areas of continued emphasis would again be those town park bathrooms, improving the community center, and the priority investment ratings really show items that could be used to bring in more users now and in the future. So you want to make sure to prioritize that particular list and look at items that you're currently offering there, as well as items that you're not offering, and see where they kind of land on that priority investment ratings. Continued focus on the mailed activity guide. Those marquee board banners and things like that can really help break down some of those barriers to awareness, but also making sure those e-newsletters, which was one of the second, I believe, most preferred sources of information, is informative. So just making sure folks understand what you're doing. If there are any improvements to town park bathrooms, just letting folks know that you've done those improvements can really go a long way, understanding that not every town of Corte Madera resident is going to visit that town park bathroom between now and the next time you administer a survey. The important satisfaction analysis was designed to pinpoint several service level items. Again, town park bathrooms, community center, athletic fields. And then the top investment priorities were really public swimming pool for facilities, trail steps and pathways, park benches to relax, read, and enjoy nature, bocce ball, community gardens and food concessions, programming events, a number of programming events. And again, really keeping an eye or a focus on, regardless of age or ability, most respondents or residents had an opportunity to say, yes, I do have a need for these particular items. And then event programming, just prioritizing those again for the town's information, because some of those items are not necessarily offered, like I've stated probably 3 or 4 times now, not offered through the town, but they are offered in the town, usually taking place in town-run facilities. So again, just kind of keeping that in mind. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen unless somebody would object to that or would like to call me back to a particular question. And I'll be on the lookout for somebody to help me kind of field questions here.
Yeah, I'll step in. Ryan, thank you so much. That's a lot of information to digest. It was an incredibly thorough survey, and we had a lot of interest in the community, as shown by the 685 responses that we got. So the data is really solid, very helpful for us as we continue to develop the master plan. Before we open it up for public comment, I want to see if there are any questions from commissioners, and perhaps you can just keep screen sharing for the moment, just in case there's a request to go back to a specific slide.
Of course.
Any questions from commissioners before we open it up?
No.
Okay, then maybe you can stop sharing for the moment, Ryan, so we can see everybody's faces more clearly. And Rebecca, if you could see if there are any raised hands. It looks like there is at least one, and then we'll also check and see if any comments came in through email.
Thank you. Yes, the first attendee with a raised hand is Sarah Vigil.
Hi, thanks. I was just curious how many surveys actually went out. So to those that live in the community, and then they went out to people who participate in programs. So what's the total number of emailed surveys and mailed surveys that went out? So what percentage actually did come back?
Yeah, I don't have that particular number of how many households are in the town of Corte Madera on the top of my head here, but I will find that out and deliver that information. As for the non-town residents, those surveys were emailed to those respondents, not by ETC Institute, so through the town's communication sources. I could really quickly give you a rough estimate of how many surveys were mailed, but I would need to refer back to my actual sampling list before I could give you an accurate number on that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd just be curious if it's thousands of surveys that went out or 1,000 surveys that went out.
Yeah, it was definitely thousands of surveys. There's about 3,900 households in the community. And I think, Louise, if I'm not mistaken, we sent out about 4,000 or maybe just shy of that. So
that sounds about right.
Yep. And it's not typical to mail to all town residents, but that was something that the commissioners and also the town was really adamant about, giving everybody an opportunity to respond, which is always a really great opportunity to kind of receive above and beyond that goal that we set out at 400 for the statistically valid survey.
So the goal was about 10%?
No, the goal was 400. That's about 10% of households, but really our normal response rate is about 20%. But in situations where we're asked to mail out more surveys, sometimes that response rate will shrink just based on the increasing of the sample.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out, the sampling, how big that sampling was. that came back.
Yep, all town residents had an opportunity to respond, and that's really the key feature there.
Thank you.
I would just add one other thing. You'll see this when the survey results are actually posted and you can look through it in more detail. We had a nice dispersion of respondents in terms of household size, age of the person who was responding, number of people in the household, age of children, et cetera. So it felt representative of our community. It didn't seem skewed.
Yeah. And even if we did only mail out 4,000, Louise, it's about a 17% response rate, which is very strong for this type of non-academic particular research. You know, somebody from Stanford might question me on that, but those folks are knocking on every single door in the community multiple times for multiple follow-up attempts in person. And that research is astronomically expensive. So.
Do we have any other raised hands? I'm not seeing any.
Thank you. No, I'm not seeing any additional raised hands, and I am not seeing any emailed public comments. But Commissioner Charlie, who, as I mentioned, is on as an attendee, I'm going to try one more time to unmute her. And if she can't unmute, she did send me a question that she was trying to ask during the commissioner question period. She said she was going to ask about how non-Corte Madera folks got the survey, given an earlier speaker said she didn't get it, but does participate in activities.
Yeah, I know that they were emailed out to those non-residents from a participation list, but I'm not exactly sure of all of the details. Also keeping in mind that if you've ever deleted a particular email or use Yahoo or Google Mail, most often some of those follow-up or those survey attempts can end up in your spam folder. And if you're not vigilant about looking through that or adding those recipients to your list, that could be a difficulty on receiving those within your internal inbox. But I believe that the town also, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley or Louise, I believe the town also put out social media reminders for that particular non-town resident survey. So there would have been ample opportunities for folks to respond. I feel like we did have a good response to that non-town resident survey, considering it was, you know, branded and labeled as a Town of Corte Madera survey. And most frequently when I do those exercises, you don't expect a huge number of respondents to reply just because they're not town residents.
Thank you. I was just going to say the town did create additional redundancies in our noticing. All social media, Instagram, Facebook, Nextdoor, several issues of our weekly town newsletter, and also a news flash to subscribers to our website's email lists.
Yeah, definitely ample opportunities for folks to respond both to the resident and non-town resident surveys.
I'm not seeing any additional raised hands, and we did not receive any emailed public comment, but I will check one more time.
And if Commissioner Charlie would like to take me up on the offer, I'm sure that Ashley or Louise can share my cell phone number. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call or send me an email. I'd be happy to take any of those questions from any commissioner or anybody on the phone this evening.
Okay, if we don't have any other email comments, Rebecca, I'm going to bring it back to the commission for any further discussion.
No, there were no additional email public comments.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other comments or discussion that commissioners would like to have on this survey at this time?
Louise, perhaps it would be helpful to talk about what happens from here with the survey results. About now that we have them, how we move forward as a commission and thinking about how these will get incorporated.
Sure, happy to just give an overview of that. So from here, this is one piece of data. It's very important quantitative data, but it's just part of what will go into informing the master plan process. From here, we are looking to have community engagement meetings, bringing community members in, giving them an opportunity to have more discussion about not only the survey results, but getting more perspective that we can't get in a 6-page survey like we did here. So those are going to be scheduled. We're shooting for November. We don't have specific dates yet. We will be doing small and larger group sessions, and we're trying to schedule them such that people can participate, whether they have an evening available or perhaps a weekend. So stay tuned for more information on that, but those will be a great opportunity for people to continue to dialogue about what we found the priorities to be. And so members of the community and others who use the facilities who maybe don't live in Corte Madera will have another opportunity to come in and help inform the thinking that's going to go into ultimately getting to a list of prioritized recommendations that will eventually get finalized, and we're shooting for the April timeframe for those to get in front of the town to inform budget planning. We will be taking these survey results to town council on November 2nd to give town council an opportunity to see what we've learned thus far.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question regarding whether the results have been sorted out by age, and can they be, and will we use the data kind of focused on what certain age groups need?
Yeah, we can definitely run those cross tabulations. At the end of the report, you'll find a copy of the survey instrument if you don't have a copy of it. And what you can do is look through there and see some of those demographic characteristics that we were to obtain from residents. We already did deliver an appendix, and I hope I'm not overstating in that I did send this, but by household type, which is basically households with particular age groups of children, as well as households without children. We delivered cross tabulations based on gender. Years respondents have lived in the town, which is something just from experience speaking, that's one of the most robust data sets when you're talking about cross tabulations. It's really household type and years lived in the town. And then also by usership and a couple other questions 2 and 3, and 18 and 19 in the survey. So we did run a number of cross tabulations that everybody can use as a little bit of extra reading material in your free time there. It's really not that interesting. That was being just a little too facetious here. So.
Well, it actually will be very informative for us, because if you think about opportunities, for instance, to further define and look for opportunities to improve programming for elementary age school children, for instance, we can look at those crosstabs and find out what people are using, what they're interested in, where we might have gaps, and where we could develop new programs in the future to meet the needs of that particular population. So, I do think that there will be opportunities for us to double click on the data and use it to inform elements of planning for Parks and Rec, be it programming or other things. But we also wanted to ensure that we didn't lose sight of the macro population and interests and priorities for the town at large, because as Ryan mentioned, there are certain elements or certain offerings that would give us the biggest bang for our investment buck based on the number of people who have identified those as priorities and an unmet need in the community.
And that's why
we can look at both.
Yeah, sorry, Louise. And that's why it's important when you're reviewing those cross tabulations to understand the threshold at which those cross tabulations are relaying that data. So the data has been delivered in columns, with each column exhibiting a particular demographic characteristic of the respondent. But you should always keep in mind and refer back to the main report in the tabular data section to understand to what extent are we analyzing those results. Keep in mind the margin of error is about 3.5% for the full aggregate results of 685. But if we're looking at households with children under 9, and there may only be 10 households in that particular type, again, circumstantial, not an actual takeout from your report. But if there's only 10 of those types of households, then those results should be viewed at a very different angle from the aggregate results and what the entire town is telling you. And just keeping that in mind as you resolve and look through those cross tabulations can really help put things into perspective for you. And it'll also tell you really what kind of margin of error you're dealing with. You want to have groups around 60 to 75 at bare minimum before you can really start to say those results are significant. So you want to keep that in mind as well.
Okay, if there's no further discussion at this time, Ryan, I want to thank you so much. It's 2 hours later where you are, so we really appreciate you staying up to take us through this data. It will be available by Friday, the 29th, and there will be a link available off the website so people can see the data and this presentation specifically. And we really encourage members of the community who are interested in this to spend some time with the data. It's fascinating. We got a lot of great insights. So thank you so much.
Thank you all for having me here, and I hope to be back. So thank you all.
Great.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, so we'll move on to business item 5B, which is a discussion and possible direction to staff regarding a winter 2021-2022 operational plan for Town Bark, our dog park.
And this is a recommended action is to review and discuss it. Their staff has recommended either approving the recommended winter operation plan as I'll present, or provide any additional feedback as you see needed. A little bit of background on this topic is since the opening of Town Park in June of 2020, the ground surface throughout the enclosed park has been reduced from grass to bare soil. Last season about this time, it was mostly the transition area when you walk into the gate that was down to soil. So that was a discussion of the last winter operational plan. But now with the increase, with the drought restrictions, there is little to no grass left in the entire area. So it's really reduced the entire park area to soil. So really needing to have some direction going forward for this winter. If you'd like to review the last operation plan, there's a link in the staff report to that as well. And then there's also recognition that we did discuss and have a presentation from Public Works on long-term fixes. This is another short-term fix as we go into the master plan discussion. We really want to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible with the town's money and our taxpayers' money, and making sure that we are investing in areas that are deemed important to our community. So that's the decision why we're doing another short-term discussion on a winter operational plan, rather than looking at synthetic and returfing and other things that have been discussed as alternative ideas. As far as cost, the projection is to have one time of mulch blown into the entire area, rather than having two phases or multiple phases of mulch brought in. That is the most cost efficient and best use of staff time. We can contract with a company that can do it in one day and bring in enough mulch for the entire area. Or we can go back to what we did last year, which was bringing in 2 installments, which was about $1,500 in staff time and materials to bring in 15 cubic yards at a time, which involved 2 workers, a full day to pick up, transport, and lay the mulch. And this year, we really want to reduce that time and be respectful of our staff. So if we can do 120 cubic yards blown in for $5,000, Public Works Director has suggested that be the most cost-efficient way. I know that there's been some sentiment in the community of people that are very in support of mulch versus not in support of mulch. So we went out and did a survey. We set up a QR code and a link through SurveyMonkey, shared it by signage at the dog park. So for people that are actually using the facility, as well as sharing it out in the town newsletter. And the survey results, as of writing the staff report, we had I think we had about 70 results. And as of today, we had 94 respondents. And those answered, 92 of those answered yes or answered number 1. And that was 91% are in support of mulching the entire area rather than closing the park. So it's something that I wish the commission to consider, that there seems to be a lot of support for those that are utilizing the dog park, as well as just taking the dog park survey. We did have a couple of people in the open-ended questions that said, well, we don't have a dog, but we think this would be great, which is important to note. So all of those responses are included in the staff report if you wish to go through it. So again, facility benchmarking, mulch is currently used at parks in Sausalito, San Anselmo. Novato has gone back and forth within theirs. I believe they actually have grass right now, and they close off segments of it, which was something that we looked into last year. But it's sort of an industry standard, especially a trend this year, as grass has been so hard to maintain, as to really utilize mulch. And then staff notes that the operational plan for this winter again is another short-term solution, and that a long-term solution should be discussed and considered during the master planning process. And then preliminary recommendations for that again is in the February 22nd staff commission report. Any questions? We also have our assistant superintendent from Public Works, Jamie King, on the line. So if you have any more technical questions, he is your technical guy.
How does it look after the past week?
I didn't walk out there today. I could only imagine that it probably echoes some of the past comments that it could be pretty swampy out there.
Whole park's a swamp.
But
So
it's green.
by putting the mulch down, I mean, I understand it provides a layer, but it will still become quite muddy, correct?
We'll have some mud, but it reduces the standing water, which can become unhealthy to dogs. Because if the dogs drink the water, as you know, having a dog that showed a cameo at the beginning of the meeting, we want to make sure that we're keeping the dogs not clean, but from not drinking and drinking potentially contaminated water.
Got it. Thank you.
I don't have a question. Are we doing comments too, or just clarifying questions?
Yeah, clarifying questions, and then we'll see if there are
Okay.
any public comments.
Got it.
So why don't we turn it to public comment and see if there are any hands raised or emails that have come in to TCM mail.
Not seeing any emailed public comments.
Looks like we have one hand
Raised
raised.
hand from James Jordan, who I will unmute now. Mr. Jordan, are you there?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. James Jordan, Mohawk Avenue. I'm curious, what the mulch, is it wood chunks? Is it fine mulch? And what was your experience with what happens to the mulch? Does it become part of the soil? Does some of it blow out, or is it tracked out?
For the technical question to Jamie from Public Works.
Yes, Mr. Jordan. That's part of the challenge that we have, just because of the different elevations with the park. We're going to try and figure out a solution because there is a concern that the mulch will leach out or drain off when the water runs out. So that's something that we're looking into. The mulch is actually the same mulch that we use for the playground. It's a engineered mulch for safety reasons, so that way there's no splinters or any sharp edges. So this is something that we still get for the safety aspect for dogs as we use for playgrounds.
Yes, I wondered if some of it could get down in the canal, for example.
I'm not going to say that it's not. I'm sure some of it's going to end up in the canal. Quite a bit of debris ended up in the canal this last storm from other properties. So I'm sure a little bit will end up in the canal, but again, we're going to find a solution to best contain the mulch into the dog park.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
It doesn't look like we
Okay,
have
I'm
any.
not, yeah, I'm not seeing any additional raised hands and no emailed public comments.
Okay, so we can bring it back to the commission. Emily, you had a comment?
Yeah, actually, then I actually did have a question. Jamie, when you say that, I mean, this is the same, what I thought this used to be called like tan bark, or is that, I mean, it's the bigger chunks of mulch, correct? That's been in there now?
Yes, it is. It's again, it's the same mulch that we use for the playground.
Right.
It's 3/4 inch, I believe, what it's called, engineered playground mulch.
Okay, great. And then my comment was, I just appreciate Ashley, you taking the time to do the survey and make sure that we had public support for it. But I definitely am, in support of just following staff recommendation. And I do think this is an unusual time right now because we're in a drought, but then we had a huge soaking and it's hard to know what kind of winter we're going to have. So I definitely like the idea of doing one more shorter term solution and then looking at it again later.
I concur.
I agree as well. I'm not a dog owner, but seems like the right thing to do and the community supports it.
I do go to the dog park quite a bit, and there is a group of regular people who use it frequently. And we actually were chatting about this week, and I agree whether these people filled out the survey or not. The general sense was it's a good idea. It's better than sort of nothing. There was a lot of talk about what's the long-term plan? What about French drains? What about turf? But I think given where we are as a commission and waiting for the master plan, it's a good idea.
Ashley, do you need us to make a motion, or you're okay with just getting our comments?
You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so I will need a motion.
Make a motion to follow staff recommendations.
Second.
I second.
Rebecca, if you could take a vote, thanks.
Commissioner Charlie, she did send an email that said she wanted to vote yes for mulch, but she didn't have a comment beyond that. Emily, if you're able to unmute yourself, you can comment. Commissioner Elson?
Yes.
Commissioner Koenig?
Yes.
Commissioner Miles?
Yes.
Commissioner Phipps?
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson? Co-Chair Janowski?
Yes.
And Co-Chair Brown?
Yes. Okay, great, thank you. So that takes us to the end of business items, and we'll move on to staff updates and commissioner reports, starting with the director update. Ashley.
Yes, so senior outreach continues. We continue to call all of our senior lists once a week. Right now, where the calls have been pushed towards the later in the week, since we are doing the Congregate grab and go meals. So those seniors that are not participating in the grab and go and we haven't already said hello to during either that event or the puzzle and book exchange on Thursday mornings, they're still getting everyone else is still getting a follow-up call. I know that one of our staff that's on here, Perry, can definitely attest. It's great to actually see people in person. And she's really, it's nice to have the rapport that have been built through the phones to actually see them in person. So it's great to have everybody welcome back into the lobby. And so senior puzzle and book exchange continues on. Now that the lobby hours are open, people can come at any time. We still are doing the special time on Thursdays from 10 to noon, but anytime the lobby is open between 9 and 4, people are welcome of all ages to come by and borrow a book and a puzzle. We've got plenty to share. The Congregate grab and go meals are going very well. We're doing those through the end of the year, and the county right now is really trying to get the logistics to offer those back in person. Right now, they're estimating mid-January, so they're just kind of seeing how COVID and all the protocols go. But as soon as we're able to, we have signed up to be a partner to begin the in-person. And then also this week is going to be starting a new collaboration with Sparkle Reusables, which is going to be, all the meals are going to be distributed in reusable containers, and those containers the participants bring back the next week, and then in between weeks, Sparkle sanitizes them. So it's kind of a nice way to introduce all the seniors back to it, and they get a bag that they bring everything back and forth to. So far we've gotten a lot of people that are looking forward to receiving their meals this week in this Sparkle reusable containers. And any of the commissioners are welcome at any time to come down and support the Congregate meals. If you want to come out and just pass out meals, we do that on Wednesdays from 11 to noon. If you want to come by, just let us know. We usually start organizing everything about 10:30, 10:45, and we're welcome to have more volunteers. Corte Madera's Children's Center. Enrollment, we've got from 1st through 5th grade aftercare, we've got 58, morning care 2, and then the kindergarten age, we have full day of 23 and part-time of 9. So their enrollment continues to increase. I'm very proud of Alex and Alex, who are leading the team over at childcare at Neil Cummins, and they continue to impress us. And hopefully the participants that are in those activities are really having a great time. And please let us know if you have any suggestions or ideas, or if you have any feedback for the staff. They love to hear anything. So whether you have kids involved or if you have neighbors involved. Staff recruitment for customer service, that's our lobby, to increase our lobby accessibility. So that would be having restrooms open as soon as we have staffing available to do so. We want to support the community to be able to use our restrooms outside of our regular 9 to 4 business hours. We're going to be in the process or coming up of hiring building attendants so that we can support renters as private rentals resume in 2022. We're going to be able to have our facility staff trained and able to set up all the tables and chairs safely. That's something that's really important to us moving forward, is making sure that we have the right classification of staff, setting up and breaking down the equipment so that we reduce any potential liability for our staff to being injured, as well as our participants. We don't want anyone getting hurt. Continue work to update department policies, forms, and marketing collateral. This is something that's been ongoing for us. It's one of our highest priorities. There's lots to do with it. We have a lot of policies and forms and paperwork in general. So we're really trying to take this downtime during COVID, and now obviously we're resuming and rebuilding to meet everybody's needs in person. But we've had a lot to go through and a lot to update. So we're slowly kind of going through that to make sure that we do it right the first time. So that means we have a COVID waiver for facility rentals that's almost ready. That'll be ready this week. Menus for after school classes will be ready for the first week in December for spring semester. And we're working to finalize the approval with the schools to make sure that those materials, which we refer to as the class menus, go out with the kids. So any kind of support for us with the schools, I believe Cove is on board and Neil Cummins is considering it. But I know that it makes a huge impact for us in our marketing abilities to connect with our community by sending home collateral in backpacks 3 times a year. So we're looking for fall semester, spring semester, and summer, and that's it. Working with the designer to do that. So we're continuing to polish our department image and our efficiency. Spring activity guide will be covering the months of January through May, and May will be duplicated for summer as well. And making sure that we will have that presentation of the upcoming classes and offerings for you at the December 6th special meeting. And that concludes my director's report for the night.
Great, thanks, Ashley. Are there any questions for Ashley?
One more quick thing. I apologize to our newest staff member, and I said that I was intending to introduce him officially on this call, but we'll wait for the official introduction for December 6th. But welcome to Tim Berry, who is our recreation program manager. So you can see his mugshot on the screen now. And we'll do official invite next time.
Welcome. Okay, if there are no questions, we'll move on to commissioner reports. First is updates from recent town council meetings, which Aline, you attended the council meetings in October.
Yes, I did. I attended the October 5th town council meeting, and there were just a couple items that pertain to Park and Rec. First being the AB 361 bill that was signed by Gavin Newsom, requiring us at each meeting, well, every 30 days, so that would be each meeting for us, to make a motion to continue to approve remote Zoom meetings for the commission. And then there was a presentation by Patty Stolier regarding the Intergenerational Center, and she did give a plug to Park and Rec involvement in calls to seniors, the senior programming by Park and Rec, and mentioned some of the programming that they're doing. And that was all.
Great, thank you. Any update on executive advisory committee, Emily?
We did not meet this month.
Okay, thank you. I already provided an update in the business item on the town park master plan survey and process, so we can skip over that. There is no update on Town Park Plaza at this time beyond what was reported last time. So that brings us to subcommittee reports, and we'll start with programming. Any update from programming?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. We sort of have been on a quest for information, just gathering information regarding programming by other towns, etc. So I met with Patty Stolier from Age Friendly Corte Madera to find out what is popular and what is important to senior programming as we go forward. She mentioned that 25% of our population approximately is our seniors, and so it's an important and large group of people in the town. I met also with Perry. Forgot to mention that Perry, Patty, and I met to talk about the senior programming and what's working now. And some of the popular things right now that are going on are the watercolor program, the chair yoga, and seniors in motion programs. So those are things that are currently being offered and will be continue to be offered. They're very popular. One of the things that we looked at is communication. As we saw in the survey, communication is kind of a key issue. We want to make sure people know about it and how to best communicate with them. And so her point was around communication is that seniors, actually, she's found that 50% are using internet and find internet like next door an important way to learn about programs. But the other 50% are really looking towards having some written materials like the catalog, but also postcards and also flyers in the lunch bags that are passed out on the senior lunch day. So we want to do both senior communication, written and internet. Book exchange, also puzzle exchange is an important time to connect and maybe give out written material and promote some of the programs. And there's kind of a commonality that they're focusing on trails and pathways, and coincidentally in the survey, trails and pathways are an important program. So maybe we can partner with them. They're trying to develop a map with trails, pathways, benches for resting, water fountains, bathrooms. Yeah, so that's what one of my tasks this last month was to get information regarding seniors. And I was given a large stack of information from other towns that I'll be going through just to kind of compile maybe other ideas. And then I'm thinking that through our community engagement sessions, we'll be able to learn more and really refine this. So any of my other?
Yeah, I'll just add, thanks, Aline, for focusing so much on the senior component here. I think now that we've gotten, a month and a half, 2 months into, I guess 2 months into the school year, just from speaking to people who are taking advantage of the after school programming, it's nice to have a chance to actually see what the experience is now. So overall, I've heard some really positive reports from different participants at Cummins primarily. Some really popular ones, like the science option, the carpentry. I know a lot of people who are doing just the aftercare and are liking it. So I think the programs that are available and being right on campus is really great. And it seems that families are pleased.
Great. Thank you. Fantastic update. How about community engagement?
Alden might have, we didn't meet this month. I think we'll be ramping up as we now have this information and actually start reaching out to the community. I would love to just put a plug in if any other commissioner has an extra interest in the community engagement piece. Commissioner McPherson doesn't seem too engaged in our subcommittee, so we would actually love to have another person join us if anyone's interested. Did you want to, I mean, I don't know, Alden, what else? We don't have really much to add right now.
We don't. I think that's the long and short of it.
Perfect.
Okay, and we already provided an update on the master plan, the process. We'll definitely be leaning into the community engagement team to make sure that we get members of the community and different interest groups to participate in our in-person meetings or our group meetings, and working with programming team too, to provide the data from the survey and also specific other ideas that come up to help inform the programming subcommittee work as well. Are there any updates, individual commissioner updates beyond what we've just covered?
I did have a community member reach out to me regarding the tree removal, and curious for what the plan is for new shade, to provide shade in the setting of the trees being taken down, and actually offering to help in brainstorming. And so I didn't know actually, from as we've talked about that, what if there was a plan in place or not yet.
Commissioner Koenig, I can probably speak to that. That a response to that should probably come from the Public Works Department, but I do know that there is no plan currently in place, though there may be in the future, but right now we're advised to not initiate any new plantings while we're under the MMWD drought restrictions.
I figured.
But they are going to be looking at options throughout the park. They're still also in the process of evaluating all of the trees in the vicinity. So it's possible that there may be more removals. So they want to wait until that whole process is finished before evaluating a plan, which I believe will be brought to the commission for vetting and support.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Rebecca, it looks like we have a hand raised from the public. Can we take a public comment?
Yes, you may. Are you at the end of the reports?
Yes.
Okay, then that would be a good time for that. There was a hand raised from Patty Stolier, so I will unmute. Patty, are you there?
I am. Thank you. And I had a very pleasant meeting with Perry and Aline. And one of the things that I suggested, which I thought would be a very simple way to poll the demographic that we're talking about, the seniors, is to stick a little survey in the drive-through bag, the grab and go lunch, and then they could bring it back with their new sparkle. They could bring it back the following week and it would have, are you interested in bridge or acrylics or, whatever. So it seemed like that would be a simple thing to do for polling the seniors. That's all.
Great. Thanks, Patty. Okay, that brings us just then to routine and other matters. Our next commission meeting is a combined meeting for the months of November and December. It will be on December 6th. And we have two agenda items already identified. One is the complete fee resolution discussion. We started last month. And we're also going to be going through the annual programming report. Are there any other items that commissioners would like to suggest for a future agenda item, either for December or afterwards? Okay. Let's see, it is coming on November, and Commissioner Miles, you are on deck for the commission meetings. I mean, not the commission meetings, the town council meetings, excuse me. So we'll look forward to your report on those. And if there's nothing else, we'll close this meeting, and thank you everybody for your time and participation. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks.
Night.
Thanks, everybody.